Hi, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to talk about American Gods, Season 1, Episode 2. So, I'm going to go on here and kind of backpedal a little bit, do a little bit of conclusion of the first episode, and then I'm going to talk about where also you can see the show because I don't think I mentioned that through the first episode review. And then I'm going into talk about episode 2, how I felt about it. Which ultimately, if I kept going with this review, ultimately you would know that um, there are like parts of this episode that I did like. There's some visually there's some visually things that are just kind of like, what? What's going on in this episode? It maybe not in the very beginning, but like once we continue on into this episode, you're just like you're drawn to it more to just be like, what is going on with this world? What is going on within this show? It's so like there's something about it that is just so like, wow, there is some risks taken with this one. There's a lot of risks taken with this one, or there's a lot of goofy things that you're just like, wow, they went there. But that's the show. That's American Gods for you. So ultimately, I didn't mention on the first season, first episode. Ultimately, you can see this show on Stars. I've seen a ton of stuff that seems to be tied to Stars. So by and large, if you have Amazon, you can probably go through and watch Stars through that. Or maybe there's a separate app separately for Stars. By and large, I think Stars is really an interesting app to go into. I've watched plenty of things from like a Stars or a Cinemax or a Showtime or something like that when they had free trials and stuff like that. So definitely I would suggest and recommend, but in the end you could also probably go into any kind of app service that probably has these things for free ultimately if you looked long enough through any of these. Cuz sometimes you just need to watch things for free, sadly, because it is what it is. And so more than likely I could recommend an app called Movie Pro, which you can see quite a bit of app like things. HBO Max's just current event like or current show like things and current movies. So American Gods, the very first episode, maybe a portion of which that I left out. So ultimately, we have Shadow Moon. Ultimately, after very much having the time with Audrey and to be uh, kind of having this woman throwing herself at Shadow Moon, ultimately leading Shadow Moon instead to be taken and to be uh, beaten up by a man named Technical Boy. There's a lot of weird and strange names through every single one of these things, and most of these people's names aren't mentioned. Most of these characters are just kind of like, what it like? Who are these people? What is going on? I'm so confused. But it's like a mind bender, and it's kind of like, man, this is something else. So we go into this episode, the second episode, with Shadow Moon had been beaten up by seemingly these men with these faces made of clay, and Technical Boy was basically blowing smoke in Shadow Moon's face. Ultimately, it seemed to have some kind of toad like fragrance that ultimately was really hitting Shadow Moon, and then eventually, since Shadow Moon wasn't giving up any information, it basically just led to him getting beaten up by the men that were tied to Technical Boy. So we now first off see Shadow Moon eventually getting his chest stapled, end up like picking himself back up from once he was beaten up from, and because basically there is a opening part of this show where you have a character called Mr. Nancy who ultimately is talking to a bunch of men on a ship and talking about how their distant future is going to come along. How basically they're he's needing them to go and break all of their chains from underneath this ship and go and like basically burn down this entire ship while they are on it. And one of the people mentioned, it's like, well, if they burn, we'll burn too. It's like, well, you're already dead. Like, believe me, like, I know because I'm from your distant future. And ultimately, that opening of this show is a little bit uncomfortable for me to talk about, and so I more than likely should have just skipped it. But there is that opening, and if you watch this, you can probably understand why I feel a bit uncomfortable, so I'm going to skip that part and then just kind of go into the other portions of this episode. Um, so, because I don't want to offend anybody. I don't. So, when going into this, we have Shadow Moon, who ultimately is, again, getting himself stapled up, and eventually going into talking to Mr. Wednesday. And so ultimately, Mr. Wednesday gives Shadow Moon, after Shadow Moon goes back to his home, cleans it all up, sells everything in his past wife's home because evidently no one else was there to take care of all of it. Shadow Moon is like cleaning the entire house up, finding his wife's phone, and there are seemingly pictures of a, let's just say, evidence of an affair that his wife had. Let's just say that. And there are also there's an evidence of this seemingly in the house somewhere, which Shadow Moon notices. And whew, man, this episode, wow. So Shadow Moon eventually cleans up the house. I'm assuming sells it. Eventually, just auctions off or tries to sell off all the furniture somewhere. Give it away, because what could he really do with it? So Mr. Wednesday finally goes to Shadow Moon and says, you know what, like, your time mourning the loss of this woman is starting for me to run out. Like I need you to start working. So like I get it, you're grieving, but like this is taking much longer than I thought it would. Like kind of thing. He's like, because reasonably, like, Mr. Wednesday is mentioning how weird it is that Shadow Moon and he tells this guy right to his face, but he's like, hey, I don't want you to punch me in the face when I tell you this, but because I've already known like what happened to a guy before, because episode 1, like, I'm just here to tell you, it's like, this is odd that you're like a wife that you found out in prison was cheating on you, and like you're grieving like this, like you're grieving like this hard about it. Like, yeah, your time is eventually going to run out, and I'm going to start needing you to like get to work. So Shadow Moon, his first task is to start getting Mr. Wednesday stuff. And Shadow Moon's like, why am I getting you all this stuff? It's like, well, like, because really, if I'm not concerned that you're taking care of yourself, then and he like is like giving him money and stuff like that. So Shadow Moon eventually goes to a grocery store or to a general goods store, like a retailer, like a Walmart or something like that, where you have like everything in one store. And here's the interesting part within his store. So Shadow Moon starts picking up some stuff like a burner phone, cocktails, all of this, like a bunch of books, and just starts picking up like random stuff. He's not even like thoroughly checking it. He's just like grabbing a bunch of crap and then chucking it into the cart most of the time. So eventually it gets to the point to where ultimately Shadow Moon is walking into a place where there are TVs. And a woman that looks just like Lucille Ball, but ultimately uh she had played in X-Files as one of the X-Files, and she was also in a bunch of other stuff. Let me pause here, though, because I couldn't find her at first. Let me pause and try to find her. All right, so we have Gillian Anderson, who was in X Files, and ultimately her character in this show is Media. Man, yeah, some of these names that are gonna come up within this episode are going to be difficult to say, especially when we get to the later part. So yeah, and this one's probably an easy one. So media comes on the TV as Lucille Ball. Of course, you guys remember the show I Love Lucy, black and white, Technicolor at some point. I Love Lucy. She comes on the TV. Gail or Gillian Anderson from X Files looking just like Lucille Ball. And I'm like, what? And she like looks just like her. I was like, wow, this is great. So we have media that is telling Shadow Moon not to work with Mr. Wednesday. Every single person, like, when is Shadow Moon gonna get a red flag that ultimately that he should not be working with Mr. Wednesday? Is because everybody is telling him the exact opposite, but I just don't think that Shadow Moon can trust anyone else. Like, I think since, like, Shadow Moon could probably only seemingly trust Mr. Wednesday, like, besides maybe Low Key, the guy that Shadow Moon saw in prison. Like, I'm wondering if that first initial tie to a person that talked to him outside of prison is the only reason why Shadow Moon has latched on to Mr. Wednesday, or is it just the fact that he doesn't trust anybody else because everyone else seems too shady every single time that they're mentioning, hey, don't work with Mr. Wednesday. So basically, media is like offering this guy anything to take this deal. Basically mentioning like bejokingly, well, like, hey, like, have you ever wanted to see like I Love Lucy's chest? Let's just say, and Shadow Moon's like, I'm not going for this deal. I'm not gonna fall for this. Like, if anything, like media has too much mystery to her, and basically like it seems like what she is all doing is a simple parlor trick, which ultimately I'm assuming Shadow Moon just will not trust. Like, why can't you just show yourself? And, but interestingly enough, Shadow Moon eventually goes to Mr. Wednesday and ultimately, like, asks him like what is he doing to his brain, what is he doing to his head. Shadow Moon is seeing so much stuff that he can't understand, and basically he is asking if this is all coming from Mr. Wednesday. And and ultimately Mr. Wednesday like won't confess to any of that. But basically, like, Shadow Moon is just kind of like on the ropes of just like, God, like, why should I see all of this? Like, every single thing is like so unbelievable. Or if I try to tell anybody any of this, they would think I'm insane. That I think that they're gonna shove me back in the prison, or they're gonna go make me go to a mental hospital. Anything that I would tell anything about this to anyone, no one would believe. So I'm telling you now. It's like, because no one's gonna believe me if I tell them any of this. What is going on? And again, Mr. Wednesday is giving no answers. So we have uh Bilquis, who again shows up in this episode. She has a even smaller role than in the very first episode. If you guys remember, basically me having Bilquis talk to Bill Murray's brother and ultimately consume said Murray. And when looking at that, basically within this second episode, basically it's an entire montage of this woman repetitiously consuming people, and that's all she does in this episode. That's all you see her. And I'm like, okay, now like we're episode 2 in, and I'm like, how is this person now going to be like tied to this story? Maybe I'll just be patient and wait till um eventually maybe the very last episode, to where she's consumed seemingly a mass army of people, and then we'll find out, oh yeah, this is how that she's tied to everything. Like, this time around she's with men, she's with women, consuming all of them. And I'm like, oh my god, this is like, it's like now they're actually really showing you how like everything is done. Like before, like the first episode, it could seem like a parlor trick. Like this one, they're really trying to like make it not seem like interesting camera angles, or they're like actually like kind of very much like uh they're trying to do even seemingly much more special effects in this episode with this scene. I was like, wow, this. All right then. So moving on. So within this episode, we have Shadow Moon getting this stuff for a reason. The stuff that he was getting, like the cocktails, I think at one point he was getting binoculars and a bunch of other stuff. So ultimately, Mr. Wednesday and Shadow Moon go on a road trip, and funny enough, Shadow Moon is giving Mr. Wednesday a cell phone, like a burner phone, and Mr. Wednesday's like, "What do I need with this?" It's like, "What am I gonna do with this?" So he chucks it out the window, and Shadow Moon mentions it's like, well, how am I gonna contact you? How am I gonna how am I gonna get to you? I have one. I have a cell phone, and Mr. Wednesday takes his cell phone and he freaking chucks Shadow Moon's cell phone out the window. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Mr. Wednesday is mentioning that he's like, well, like God, all cell phone thing, God, are those so garbage? Like, man, remember when you used to have like letters and like you would have to just be like waiting for a letter by your door and just be on the cusp of anticipation because you would just have to slightly pull the mail and just see what it is and just what are they going to tell me? Are they going to tell me hello? Are they going to tell me goodbye? Are they going to say that I'm going to have a good time at my best friend's wedding? I don't know. Is it happy birthday? Is it my birthday and I didn't remember? And like I over exaggerate it, but cuz joke. But he didn't say all of that. He just talks about like the letter and how like you're like drilling for anticipation, just like I want to know what that letter is. And then eventually he goes into whatever happened to telegrams. Like, you know how thoughtful a telegram was, where basically you'd have to like get a guy to sing some show tune to your door, and you'd have to like pay the person per word and stuff like that, and like he goes on a whole tangent about this whole like communication thing and how basically it's changed over time. So here's where we get some parts in this episode where I'm just kind of a little baffled, a little baffed, or a little confused where we get within this episode, because it kind of just leaves off at this like weird, bizarrish part. But it's just overall just kind of a weird, bizarrish like I'm like, okay, where are we gonna go with this? So we end up having Mr. Wednesday seemingly had gone grocery shopping for a lady named Zoria Vishnaria. Vishnaria. These names. All right, so your Zoria, evidently, yeah, she is getting some stuff, but then ultimately she's also getting stuff for that Mr. Wednesday mentioned is for her family. So we also have a character that people will be very familiar with if you've ever seen Prison Break or if you've ever played the video game Until Dawn or any number like Armageddon. If you've ever seen that movie, he plays the Russian astronaut. Um, I'm gonna try to pronounce this Xenobog. Xenobog? Because it's Czerno Bog. It could be uh, Zekenobog? Zekenobog. Probably pronouncing that wrong. But anyways, so we also have this character that is seemingly within this episode a person that takes down seemingly cattle, takes down cows, ultimately takes them down with hammers, like almost like sledgehammer like sized hammers. And I'm like, what is going on here? Because here's the thing. We meet Zenobog, ultimately Peter Stormare, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, but hopefully I'm not. So I'm probably just going to call him for the rest of the time Peter, because that's his real name. I saw him on Constantine as well. He's at the tail end of that. He plays the devil. It's great. So Peter comes in and eventually seems that he's not going to attack anybody. He's not going to kill anyone. Basically, it ends up that he goes on this rant about checkers and chess. Basically, how checkers is a real... It seems to be much more of a real even game than chess is. Ultimately, Shadow Moon can appreciate that, and so reasonably, it's like, well, Peter mentions, it's like, well, hey, how about, like, you and me play chess, or play checkers, not chess, because ultimately, they want to, like, checkers is more of an even game. So, eventually, at some point, they do end up playing checkers, and the episode eventually ends with Peter seemingly like holding his axe, like, or holding his sledgehammer that either has blood on it or doesn't have blood on it. And that keeps going back and forth. He's just like holding this sledgehammer and there's blood dripping off of it, or there's blood not dripping off of it. As if they had to do this take twice with blood and not blood. And I'm like, so they must have done the entire take first without blood. Then they put the blood in. Because that's what you would have to assume. And, like, man, I hope that they, like, I wonder how they, like, did that long of a take all with it looking the exact same the whole time. That would be interesting to try to figure out or understand. More than likely, it's just like, dude, just like keep swaying back and forth. Keep like every single time doing the same motion over and over. Simple is the easiest way we'll do this. If it looks like it doesn't, like if the cuts don't match, then we'll edit it later. But yeah, so like at the very tail end of this episode, I was like, okay, what is any of this? What is the real tail end? Like, I tried to like watch it back over, but I couldn't reasonably to me like retain anything, because it's just like, okay, what is this part here that I am going to invest in and or care about? Because that's what I was trying to like. Are we going anywhere with this? Like, it is like there are some parts within this show where I think there are some parts where they extend it and they really like they make a big deal about something, but then there's also parts where there's like a lot of throwaway. So it's just like, well, this show doesn't 100% feel like something you absolutely need to stay 100% glued on to, but there are some vastly interesting things about it at some points that if you're not paying attention to, like you'll regret missing and you'll want to go back and just like, what's going on here? What's going on? I'm like, this is interesting visually. I think reasonably a lot of these first two episodes break down for me easily as just visually interesting. And everything visually interesting is the thing that is going to keep me watching. If this show stops being visually interesting, then I will be visually watching something else. Because I'm trying to like I think like everybody when watching a complex like show that ultimately like is going to give you little things here and there to just kind of um like eventually be to the very last episode is going to give you the big thing and just tell you, oh yeah, this is why this is going on with this person. But I'm really loving Shadow Moon, like the like Mr. Wednesday and Shadow Moon, like every one of their interactions are just so interesting, and reasonably there is something about this where I watch more and more where I'm just kind of like I'm like, so what? Like they went that far? They did this in this episode? So I keep watching just because maybe even shock value at some points, which is fine if that's how you want to watch a show. Um, but I think with me talking about this for 30 minutes, I'm going to go. I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, buddy. Bye, buddy.